Welcome everybody to this week's episode of the Hamirpur Tales Hour. And just this past weekend, many of us, 155 of his lovers, gathered outside of Mariposa, California, for a biannual Sahavas at Mehrana, which is a retreat center dedicated specifically to Avatar Meher Baba. And to my great surprise, there were several people who I hadn't seen for quite some time who were amongst the 155. Charles Haynes was a keynote speaker, and the reason Charles was not in attendance at the main Mela is at that time he was in Emory in Georgia, advancing his career and getting his degree there. And Richard Leviton, who's also with us today, was not there, even though he knew so many of us from the New England and the Boston Barber Group based in Cambridge, because he was in chiropractic college down in Sherman College of Chiropractic down in Greenville, North Carolina. So amongst those was Jim Whedon, and Jim not only was at the main Mela, but he came a few weeks early, and he had the vision and the technology. He was the architect for our 40-foot geodesic dome. Before we talk more in detail about that, Jim and I got to play a little music on the stage, and because of the limitations of Bob Zoom, I can't join Jim on blues guitar, but he has a cappella song for us. And Jim, why don't you take it away? Let's hear the Baba Dog Blues.
Yeah, so it's the Mighty Dog Blues. Yeah, it just came to me. Sorry. It just came to me, we had kind of a dog theme going on like last weekend at Mehrana, because Charles told some dog stories, and then there were dog tryouts, right? A couple of, because we're trying out the kind of the policy of allowing dogs at Mehrana. We have a dog, and we ended up leaving him at home because wasn't clear that that would be okay to bring him. But anyway, yeah, it got me thinking about this song, which I'm not a musician, but I just was really inspired by an experience. It was over 10 years ago, and I was leaving Mehrabad after a beautiful stay of 2 or 3 weeks, and just really feeling the pain of leaving, and started howling. I was like howling like a dog. It made me think of the dogs. You see the dogs on top of Mehrabad Hill, and Mansari kept dogs, and so anyway, here we go. It's the Mighty Dog Blues, and I'll try to remember the words this time. Sometimes I don't remember. So, I wish I was a dog living on Mehrabad Hill. Yes, I wish I was a doggy living on Mehrabad Hill. 'Cause if I was a Samadhi dog, I would be there still. If I was a Samadhi dog, I would never stray. I would not cross the railroad tracks. I would never stray. So if you see a Samadhi dog, let that sleeping dog lay. I would take prasad in the morning, lie around all day. Take prasad again at night, lapping up his loving light. I wish I was a dog living on Meherabad Hill. 'Cause if I was a Samadhi dog, you know I would be there still. I would have no master, none but the master of all. I would obey no master, none but the master of all. I would sit and stay at the heart of the world, waiting for his call. I would take prasad in the morning, lie around all day. Take prasad again at night, lapping up his loving light. I wish I was a doggy living on Meherabad Hill. 'Cause if I was a Samadhi dog, I would be there still. Oh, yes, I would.
Awesome. Awesome.
Oh, that was wonderful. Oh, oh. Thank you so much for it was great with Ray's guitar too, but it's also Alan Ray's, I mean, but it's great. Thank you for thank you, thank you. Great
Oh,
Thank
song.
you, Lisa.
we appreciate you so much, Jim. So,
Alan,
briefly,
can I say something? I think it would be
oh,
good if you, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Um,
go for it.
it would be good for you to make the connection between Hamirpur and Pukar and the main Mela. It isn't. I just thought it'd be good for you to say how that's all intertwined.
That's
If
exactly where I was going to go next, Betty. But uh, thanks for
okay,
uh, the lead in. So, I have discussed in other Hamia Tales episodes um, uh, the, so to speak, the full bouquet of how the main male came into being. I'm going to give a brief overview so that people who haven't been there uh, will have a sense of it. So it was in 1974, and it was my first trip to India, and there I was at Mehrabad at Amartithi, and I had been guided by Richard Leviton to seek out Pukar uh, at Amartithi and ask him if I could accompany him back to Hamirpur. And so I was very blessed and fortunate to do just that. And we went to Mehewa Maristana. We were there February 10th at 1:05 a.m., 20 years after Baba declared Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. And there is so much love and heart. Hamirpur is on fire. Baba said, "My body I leave in the Samadhi at Mehrabad, my mind in the Mananash cave near Hyderabad. My heart, I leave my heart in Hamirpur." So, in the early 70s, as we've heard on other episodes, many young Western Baba lovers were drawn to Hamirpur. And I felt so strongly about it that I wanted to go back in 74 in November when they were going to be celebrating the anniversary of when Baba first stepped into Hamirpur in November of '52. And it wasn't feasible for me to do so. So I came up with the idea that if I couldn't go to the Mela in Hamirpur, I would have the Mela in my backyard. And in my backyard, we were on a piece of land that we'd bought in July of '73, right around Silence Day, 102 acres. And so we certainly had the land. Back then, our Baba meetings in the state of Maine were very, very spread out. We would gather about once every 6 weeks, and it might take, and of course, we few Baba lovers were not uh, living all that close to each other. So it might take an hour or two or even longer to actually just to get to the meeting. And Jim, why don't you jump in here and talk a little bit about our what you can recall of our main Baba group back then.
Yeah, I guess my memories of that time were a little sketchy, but I think, one of the central figures in the main Bauer group was Ken Lux, who many of you probably knew. And, Ken was just so enthusiastic and such a wonderful communicator and eager to spread Baba's message to anyone who would listen. And I believe I was visiting with Ken when I first ran into Alan. I think Alan and Janet arrived one day and were, I don't know if they'd, what exactly what was happening, but I do remember that it was at Ken's and not on a place near Penobscot Bay down on the coast of Maine. And of course, Alan's place was kind of towards the mountains in the northwestern part of Maine. So and yeah, there were a bunch of different people that came and went in the main group, but we were pretty spread out. And a funny memory I have of those times. There are a number of families. Some of us had young kids. We had my wife Karen and I. No, that was later, several years later. But anyway, we would, as Alan said, we would travel long distance to get to the meeting, and it was after a long week of work or whatever, and we would be pretty tired by the time we had the meeting and had our meal. And I just remember one time we were all kind of stretched out on the floor of Ken's little home in the woods that he had built and I helped him build. And I some of us kind of started dozing off, and the little kids were going around putting blankets on the adults, pretending like they were playing house and putting us to sleep. But it was a great group. And I have very fond memories of that time.
Thank you, Jim. So back to the land for a few minutes. We had 23 acres of fields, and we'd built a cabin in the fall of '73. And we had a natural foods catering service and back then. Previously, a Pinch of Love Natural Foods Bakery in Vermont, and that shifted in '75 to a Pinch of Love Natural Foods catering service. And so we chose to have a huge garden in order to grow all the food for the Mela. And it was a full acre of vegetables and a few beans and so forth. And the it was a gentle hill overlooking a pond, Barker Pond in the distance. So it was very tranquil. It was a beautiful, beautiful setting. And however, uh, when we invited Darwin and Gene Shaw to come, they declined. And I can certainly appreciate that because things were very primitive, very, very primitive. We didn't even have it together to order porta potties. There's plenty of fields. People pitched their tents, and tents were spread out all over the fields, all over the place. And someone had to go. They had to head for the woods, which were plentiful as well. We had a lot of mixed hardwoods and softwoods. And of course, back then we were quote unquote homesteading. We're heated by wood and would cut our firewood and so forth and so on. Where we were growing our food, cutting our firewood, and living off the land. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, well, of course, most everyone did camp out. It was a beautiful summer weather. We were blessed with nice weather, so it was really delightful, but not everyone camped out. I remember that Erwin Luck was one of the attendees, and Erwin stayed in a motel in Skowhegan, which is what, 10 miles away, like the nearest town where you would have anything like a motel. And the reason he stayed in the motel is he told him that Baba told him to get a good shave every morning. And he didn't feel like he would be able to do that given the primitive conditions at the Mela. So he chose to stay in the motel that had an actual bathroom with running water so he could get a good shave.
That's a great, great, great story. Yeah, we charged people $25 for the 3-day weekend, probably included about 8 to 10 meals. And we did the cooking on our wood stove there in the cabin. And we set up a buffet behind the house. Um, and so people would come at the appropriate times to to be fed, and among other things, we we had the pinch of love granola for everybody for breakfasts, and that was much appreciated. Um, one,
But not everyone actually appreciated the food. And Alan and Janet were great with food. They were in the catering business. They actually catered my wedding, and we had made a beautiful carrot cake for our wedding cake. That was, I guess, not long after the Mela, actually, several months after the Mela. I got married to Karen Gaynor, who spent the summer there also and was there for the Mela. But I do remember that Pukar's companion, Sitaram, his companion from Hamirpur, accompanied Pukar. And I got up early in the mornings, I usually did, and there was Sitaram out in the garden looking for something that he knew what it was, some vegetable or some food stuff that he could eat that he was familiar with.
yeah, yes, Sitaram loved to forage in the garden, and in the cabin, our home. where somehow we made space for Sitaram and Pukar, would have been on the floor. I can recall Sitaram. We had all our uh, our supplies, our rice, our beans in glass jars on open shelves. And one night, there's Sitaram opening a jar of mung beans. And you know, Jim, as well as I do, that mung beans are very, very, very hard. And he was he was munching on raw mung beans. I couldn't believe it. For those of you who are new to Sitaram, he was a sidekick of Pukar, one of Pukar's best friends. He lived in Kanpur, which is also in Uttar Pradesh. It's a couple of hours. It's the other side of where the Bidwa and the Jumna rivers converge. On one side is Kanpur, and on the other side is the little district of Hamirpur. And and so it was great to have Sitaram along with Pukar, without question. So, Jim, when did you and Karen do you have any recollection of when you might have arrived on the land in Athens?
Well, I was there for the summer. I don't remember exactly when I came. Was it June sometime, perhaps? And and I guess I already knew that we were going to have a Mela. I think maybe I was there to help out, I guess. But anyway, I was, in a position to kind of do as I pleased at that time, living kind of a kind of a vagabond life. So came for the summer to help out, and then my girlfriend or fiance at the time, Karen Gaynor, joined me later on in the summer and was there for the Mela, and we actually got married that fall. And we were married for 20 years. And Karen had actually knew Alan and Janet because she had worked in the Pinch of Love natural foods bakery with them. So, and we lived in a chicken coop. There are all these old farm buildings around the old farm there, and there was a chicken coop with a dirt floor, and I think I don't recall. I remember remodeling the chicken coop. I think maybe I built a floor and made into sort of a home. And it was actually pretty comfortable. It had a sleeping loft, and we were quite happy living in a chicken coop for the summer.
Yeah, one of the other outbuildings, and I actually just learned this a couple of years ago. We called it the carriage house, but didn't really appreciate that the carriage house, which was in pretty decrepit condition by 1975, it was actually built like in 1849. It had been there, and it was actually kind of like a stable, which is why they called it the carriage house. And Richard Brown, who was still on the land, shared this with me when I was up visiting the land in 2023. So
Wait a minute. The carriage house, I thought there was a barn there, and
that's
some
what.
people actually stayed in the barn. And I
Okay,
think you
that's
called it the Must Hotel.
yes.
Wasn't that the Must
I was
Hotel?
just thank you, because I was just and we yes we called this carriage house back in 75. We referred to the Must Hotel, and 12, as you know, 12 came from Chicago, the Mayor Players, and they previewed two original plays, The Net of Love on the 9th and The Trees on the 10th of August of 75. They're on our little stage. But Bill Haviland was one of the 12 from Chicago, and he came perhaps even a month earlier, and he was the resident must. He lived in what we called the Must Hotel, and he was there to help with our preparations for the big event, and people came from all over. It was just astonishing. When people learned that Pukar was from Hamirpur was coming, wow, uh, who would have known that so many people would have shown up? Uh, it was very, very special and considered by most to be the first Western Sahabas after Mayor Baba dropped his physical body.
Yeah, I think
So,
the main mela actually preceded Northeast Gathering and Southeast Gathering and all those other things have gone on for years. Yeah, and Pukar and Sitaram were not the only people who came from India. There was a woman from South India whose name I don't remember, who also came.
yes, Richard has shared that name with me. I don't have it in front of me. She was actually a doctor, and she was at the time practicing medicine, I believe, in Canada. But yes, it was great. If she was from southern India, and it was great to have her amongst us. Um, and
We had people from Myrtle Beach and from California, New York, Boston.
so Eric Tepperman has relayed the following story to me, and that he was involved one day in food preparation. And the very woman that the doctor that you're referring to, was next to him, and they were chopping vegetables or some such. And Eric was in conversation with her, and she invited him to slow down and think of Baba every time he was cutting a slice of a vegetable. And it was a very, very meaningful and important lesson uh, that Eric referred to and has continued with as a way of maintaining that constant link, the constant companionship with our divine beloved. So at at some point we decided that we were going to put up a dome, and it, you facilitated that. Uh, can you share a little bit about that process?
Well, I was into domes, right? A few years, not, I guess not terribly long before that, a couple of years before, I was hitchhiking through Colorado and got picked up by some people and took me to their commune for the night. And it was all these domes. It was actually a kind that had a name. It was called Drop City. And it was established by a guy named Steve Baer, who was a proponent of solar energy and alternative energy and like stars and so on. Anyway, I was became fascinated by domes, which were invented by, if geodesic domes are invented by Buckminster Fuller. And I later heard him speak at the University of Maine a couple years later, and ended up building a dome of my own to live in, also in Maine. And then when we got the idea to have this mela, I thought, let's build a dome, a a geodesic pandal. So and the creating a dome, the math and the measurements are very precise. We needed a good workshop where we could have the right kind of equipment to cut the struts, which were made out of 2x4s, to exactly the right length and exactly the right angle. So Alan found someone who had a good, wood shop with all the right tools, and we went to work. And I think Janet somehow found the cloth to cover the dome. It was yellow. It was beautiful yellow cloth that covered the dome and it was set on a hillside up on the top of the hill, kind of on a slope. So first we had to build the foundation, or the sill. So we put posts into the ground, and then I think it was like railroad ties or something that similar, that made the sills, and then on top of the sills we built the dome. And it required scaffolding, which we pieced together from trees held together with ropes, and then boards nailed into the trees. And it was just this really primitive, kind of bizarre scaffolding that was. I'm surprised we all survived the work of putting it all together. But it was a lot of fun. The dome ended up being quite well constructed as a kind of a temporary structure, and we covered it with cloth with an opening on the uphill side, so you could actually, if there was the overflow crowd not sitting in the dome, could sit on the slope above the dome and look in and see what was going on. And we built a stage at the downhill side where Pukar spoke, and of course there was music, and then the Chicago group had plays and so on. So yeah, it worked out pretty well.
It sure did. Sure did. So here it is. We've received word that Pukar has made it all the way from New York to Boston, and that he is in a vehicle. He's on his way 167 miles to Augusta, and then another 52 to Athens. And it's approaching 2 o'clock. Approaching 2 o'clock, which we had decided was the start time of the main mela. And what were we starting with? Those who had gathered, and by then there were about 75 of us. Friday afternoon, we were under the pandal, getting ready to take Baba's name, a Japa Mela. So I look at Ken looks at Jim, and what do we do? Do we wait for Pukar to show up? And I don't remember which of the three of us who it was that said, it's important that we start on time. Baba would want us to start on time. So we collectively decided, yes, we were going to start on time. And so we started taking Baba's name promptly at 2 o'clock. No sighting, no sign of Pukar. And telecommunications, well, there really weren't. Of course, we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have any landlines up by the dome either. So we didn't know exactly when Pukar was going to arrive. you want to go ahead and describe what we saw?
I
Two.
remember, I mean, we were all assembled in the dome, and we started a jump. We were chanting Baba's name. And as I said, the dome was built on a slope of a hill, right? So at the uphill side, the sills were at the ground level. But on the downhill side, because the sills were level, they were maybe 30 inches above the ground at the most, or at the high, at the lowest point of the ground. So, and the cloth which covered the geodesic structure just came down to the sills. So you could see under the sills, you could see out if you're sitting inside, as I was sitting inside the dome. I could see out, I could see the ground outside. And it wasn't long after we started at 2 o'clock. It was only a, a couple of minutes, I think. How 5 minutes? Okay,
Yeah, about
it wasn't long. And I I happened to look out under the sill and I saw this pair of brown feet with like the white dhoti, right? Bare bare feet or sandaled feet, I don't remember. And I was just took my breath away, right? It's like, oh, this must be Pukar. And a moment later, there he appeared in the doorway. It was a magical moment. We were so happy that he had come, and Helen said, this was pre-cell phone. We're just way the heck up there in the northern Maine, and there he was, and we were all there, and that was the beginning of the Mela.
Thank you, Jim. And so, yeah, Pukar and Sitaram was along with him. They just uh, came in under the pandal, found a little space, and just sat down and chanting along with everyone else. And after the hour, we made a procession, still taking Baba's name collectively. We had a little hut, our own little japti at the very, very top of the hill. And we marched up there and left two people inside to take Baba's name for a 2 hour shift. And different people stepped up to do so. And this we did for till 2 o'clock on Sunday. Do you recall whether you took a shift or not?
Yeah, yeah, I took a shift in the Japti hut. Right, it's kind of in the Mehrabad tradition. Everything was recycled, right? So the Japti hut was some little outbuilding. I don't know, maybe it was an outhouse. I don't know what it was. It was this little shack, and I remember somehow getting it onto a pickup truck and driving it up through the field up to the top of the hill. And it was in this sort of isolated spot, even more isolated than where the dome was. It was way up to the woods. And then we kept going with that jump continually during the Mela.
Yeah, I don't think it was much bigger than 6 by 6. Very, very small. So, any questions out there from anyone about the main Mela? Betty, you got your hand up.
Betty, I
we
think
don't.
you're muted.
Uh, do,
You
do
need to
you,
unmute.
What were your
can you?
how what were
Thank you.
your impressions of how Pukar and Sitaram, how did they react to this very primitive situation in the US? I mean, it sounds like it was pretty different from, although not so different from Hamirpur. pretty different for the rest of the U.S. What did you think? Were they fine with it all, or probably? Huh?
Well, that brings up a story that Gil Alvarado told us in a previous episode, and Gil happened to be in college out in Portland, Oregon at the time, and that's where he connected up with Pukar. And Pukar relayed a story about when he was traveling from Maine down to Myrtle Beach on when he was on the New Jersey Turnpike, and Irwin was in the car. There were a few others as well, but Pukar told Gil that he couldn't believe he was on a freeway, and there was nothing going on the sides of the roads. With no vegetation, no animals, no people piddling on the side of the freeway. And Pukar says, "What, did a bomb strike here?" So I would say that Pukar and Sitaram were much more at home up in the woods and in the fields in Athens, Maine, than perhaps anywhere else as he toured the United States. So here's Terry. Do you have any reflections or recollections? Please jump in.
Well, you know, I had met Pukar in New York. I was working for James Cox at the time, and they brought, I don't know who brought him to the office, but maybe James did. I can't remember. And he was wearing a suit, like a regular suit with a tie and a white shirt, and he looked great. You know, he looked like he just fit right into the city. And he went around the whole office, and there were people in that office that were not Baba people. I mean, they were far from it. And, you know, James's partner, and then a few other workers there. And he went around and he was just hugging and kissing everybody. And it was so wonderful. The whole place was just filled with love and affection. And it was just wonderful. It was just the sweetest time. And I think that's where I got inspired to go to the Mela after I met Pukar at the office there. And then went. And it was and then Sitaram was not with him in New York, but then I met him up in Maine.
Well, that
I don't know where he was.
that's sort of uh, creates a little confusion for me because I thought Athens was pretty much Pukar's first stop, but you're indicating otherwise. And I don't know, maybe I don't know where they were staying that one night in New York City, but Sitaram was with him. He just didn't go to that particular office. You know, they traveled. They most definitely traveled together.
I think probably James would know, you know, the details of that. I was just I was so I was you know, I was only into Baba for a few years by then. You know, it's just kind of I don't know, just a little oblivious to details and that kind of thing. So anyway,
Any reflections or recollections of being on the land in Maine? You were camping, I presume.
yeah, yeah. And I can't even remember who I went up there with. I remember Bobby Bernstein was there, but I hadn't traveled with her. But I know we went up by car from New York City, and I remember Steve LaFleur. Jim, did he help you build the geodesic dome? Steve LaFleur?
Yeah, I knew Steve. I don't think he worked on the dome. It was me, Alan, Ken Lux,
Yeah.
Tree, a guy named Tree, and I think Craig Ruff. Those are the ones I remember working on the dome. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Steve played some part in maybe painting the mural there. There was a mural, wasn't there? Do I remember that correctly? There was something. Anyway, I was just wondering if you remembered him.
Yeah.
He was out in California.
I remember him very, very well. I haven't seen him in years.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about the
Yeah,
mural.
yeah. Steve certainly um, helped raise the energy. Uh, he has a way of doing that. He's still dancing and prancing uh, over in Hawaii now. He he's he's a beautiful man, great brother. Uh, haven't had a lot of contact with him over the years, but yeah, it was great to have him amongst our crew. Yeah, yeah.
Pukar certainly made a deep impression
Oh,
on me. I thought he seemed to me to be perfectly comfortable in that rural environment in Maine, because really adaptable. Sitaram maybe a little bit less so. Um, but Pukar just was completely open and relaxed and didn't seem to need anything and was just happy to be there. And I remember just this one moment, you know how some moments just sort of stick in your mind and heart, and I'm not sure exactly why, but we were standing in the remains of a barn, right? That was, and there was all this sort of like composted cow manure and plants like burdock and things that would grow up, you know, in a barnyard. And but that's just to give you a sense of sort of the rural nature of the environment. But and there were a few of us gathered around, and Pukar was just so like simple, kind of and childlike. And I remember him saying to someone, "Be happy," and he said it like I can say that, but it doesn't mean anything. When he said it, it meant something, right? Because he had the authority to say, "Be happy," right? Almost, you know, like Baba did. Pukar could say that, and you could feel it, right?
Mm.
Um, he was he was really special.
You know, he seemed really comfortable in New York too, wearing the suit and in the city. He seemed like there was just no problem at all. He was himself, you know, hugging and kissing everybody. And it didn't seem to faze him being there.
Pukar was incredibly adaptable.
Yeah.
Hmm.
He he was so in tune with Baba, and wherever he went, Baba's presence was available and felt very strongly by so many people he touched. Baba just was coming through him so beautifully, sweetly, and strongly. Yeah. So we've only got a few more minutes here. Um,
How long did they stay? How long did the Mela last?
the Mela was started at 2 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of August, and it ended about 3 o'clock on Sunday, um, which was the 10th of August. And the next day, Pukar left
Mm.
through Boston in New York and I know he made a stop in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because Harry Kenmore's society had a retreat there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Steve and Elaine Goodman and Ira Goodman were amongst those who were with Pukar there. Irwin accompanied him and says he's documented that, but as far as actually remembering going from place to place with Pukar, it's only been 50 years, so we didn't get a whole lot of recollections from Irwin when he shared his time with Pukar earlier. Terry, you got anything else for us?
I have to say that I heard Gil's talk. I heard it after it was recorded, and I just went on one night, and I was just so blown away by his talk and his beautiful expression when he was describing his trip to Hamirpur and meeting everybody and Chugging Master and Pukar. I mean, it was incredible, really.
It sure was.
And that signature that, from that Keshav Nigam had given, his, he signed his book, that whole story about him signing. I was
Everybody's book. He signed everybody's book when
I know that's what he said. And wow, what an effort that was. I met Keshav Nigam at Amartithi. There were a couple of Amartithis I went to, and also like very, very special person. Wow.
Yeah. He certainly was. And so just to let folks know, I encountered Barbara Roberts, Baba Ra from Colorado this past weekend at Mehrana. And she was there with Pukar in Hamirpur in 76. And she's going to be with us for a little bit next Monday. And then the following Monday, Charles Haynes will be with us.
Yeah.
And although Charles personally has never been to Hamirpur, he was with Erich. And during one of his talks this weekend at Mehrana, he took us to Mandali Hall there and shared Erich's tale about how he ended up in Hamirpur and why. And I could say more about that, but instead, I'll save it for Charles. And hopefully, you can all join us then. So, thank you all for your shares, especially Jim. Outstanding. And the Samadhi Dog
for
Blue.
singing, Jim.
Thanks for asking. I enjoyed it.
And so we like to end a couple of minutes before the top of the hour so that it can be a smooth transition to the evening arti. So we like to conclude with three Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jays. Avatar
Meher Baba
Baba,
Ki Jai.
Avatar
Meher Baba
Ki
Ki Jai.
Avatar
Meher Baba G'day. Okay, so stop recording.